I've gone to walk aboard an alien ship. On a storm-lashed night in 1980, 32-year-old Granger Taylor left a note on his bedroom door. It read, in part, quote, "Dear Mother and Father, I've gone away to walk aboard an alien ship. Recurring dreams assured a 42-month interstellar voyage. Love, Granger." Then he vanished. Search parties combed the woods of Vancouver Island, where Taylor had lived on his parents' farm. They found a workshop littered with half-built machines, rusting bulldozers, and the shell of a homemade spaceship. For 6 years, there was nothing. Then, in 1986, loggers stumbled upon a crater high on Mount Prevost. In the center, twisted metal, shards of blue paint, bone fragments, and the charred fabric of a shirt his mother had sewn. The truck's VIN matched Taylor's Datsun. Officially, he was dead. Killed in an explosion so large, it tore a crater in the forest floor, with a blast area 600 feet across. Unofficially, his legend was just beginning. Granger Taylor had been a kind of folk engineer, a dropout prodigy from the town of Duncan, British Columbia. By 14, he was rebuilding engines. By his 20s, he rescued a derelict steam locomotive from the woods, piece by piece, and restored it to full working order. His restored World War II Kitty Hawk fighter drew crowds, but his true obsession was what lay beyond Earth itself. By the late 1970s, amid a global UFO fever, fueled by films like Close Encounters and Star Wars, Taylor began to believe he could communicate with extraterrestrials. He built a spaceship from 2 satellite dishes, outfitted it with a wood stove, couch, and TV, and sealed himself inside for hours, communing, as he said, with voices from the stars. His friends thought it was eccentric, but harmless. He'd smoke, experiment with psychedelics, and talk about a mysterious invitation he'd received from aliens who'd chosen him to join them on a journey. He promised he'd be back in 42 months. That night in November, Granger stopped at Bob's Grill, ate dinner alone, and drove off toward Mount Prevost, carrying a large amount of dynamite taken from his family's shed. This wasn't entirely unusual, as he often kept dynamite in his truck for blasting tree stumps. At around 8 p.m., witnesses heard a distant boom, a sound that could have been thunder or something stranger. He told his friend, Robert Keller, that the aliens would arrive in a storm, using the weather as cover for their ship. Some believe Granger planned the explosion himself, while others say it was an accident. But friends doubted both theories. Granger knew dynamite like he knew engines, and he was meticulous about safety. They also swore his truck had been painted pink. Yet police stated the fragments found in the blast belonged to a blue vehicle. For those who knew him, that detail mattered. It left open one last, strangest possibility, that the explosion wasn't an end at all, but a distraction, that the aliens had come, just as he said they would. Maybe he left exactly as he planned, through fire and storm, to the place he'd always dreamed of. After all, Granger's note didn't say goodbye. It said he'd return. "27 giants in copper coffins." They met every night for 6 weeks, 80 men and women in all, scientists, museum curators, editors, dreamers. They were preparing to follow a geologist into the side of a mountain to uncover a lost civilization of mysterious giants. But on the morning of the expedition, the man who had summoned them vanished. No note, no trace, no expedition. Just an open question that still haunts the shadow of Mount Shasta. Who was J.C. Brown, and what did he find in the mountain? 3 decades earlier, in 1904, Brown claimed he'd discovered an ancient tunnel beneath Mount Shasta while surveying for gold. An 11-mile passage that wound into the volcanic heart of Northern California's most mysterious peak. Inside, he said, were things no man should have seen. Machinery of unknown origin, a glowing worship room, golden tables etched with lost languages, and 27 skeletons. Giants, some over 10 feet tall, entombed in copper sarcophagi. When Brown re-emerged, he buried the entrance and kept silent for years, unsure of what he had found. But sometime after 1920, a new theory began to spread in California's mystical circles, that the West Coast was all that remained of the lost continent of Lemuria, a Pacific Atlantis whose people, impossibly tall telepathic beings known as the Lemurians, had fled underground after a cataclysmic flood. Books like Lemuria, the Lost Continent of the Pacific, turned Mount Shasta and its tunnels into a magnet for seekers. Brown became obsessed with the theory, convinced he'd found the last refuge of a lost civilization. Yet the discovery seemed to curse him. Friends he confided in, he said, died in freak accidents. He vanished for years, surfacing occasionally to tell his story in bars and mining towns. By 1934, at age 79, Brown resurfaced in Stockton. He recruited 80 people to accompany him back to the tunnel. He promised expedition members the artifacts inside 2 rooms. He would keep what lay in the third. For 6 weeks, they planned every detail. The night before the departure, Brown was in good spirits, speaking of Lemurians as if they were old friends. By dawn, he was gone. No note, no tracks, no body. Just a vanished old man and a town full of broken believers. Some say he fled in fear. Others believe he was silenced by secret societies. A few still whisper that Brown was taken, invited back into the mountain by those tall beings with glowing eyes and silent footsteps. After all, stories of hidden watchers on Mount Shasta long predate J.C. Brown. For generations, the Modoc and Wintu tribes spoke of spirits who dwell above the tree line, a place reserved for the gods, where mortals were never meant to walk. One-way moon ticket. They'd told a mechanic at the airfield that they were going to meet friends. Not in the desert, but beyond it. They called these friends the Misserians, aliens who were hiding on the moon. On November 11th, 1953, 2 men climbed into a rented Cessna at a small Los Angeles airfield and vanished into the sky. They had 3 hours of fuel, no flight plan, and a belief they would not be returning. Carl Hunrath was an electrical engineer with a volatile temper. Wilbur Wilkinson was a family man with a wife and 3 children. His was a seemingly normal existence, at odds with a living room wallpapered in UFO sketches and strange pictographs labeled with an unknown language. Together, they built a device called Bosco, which they claimed could bring down flying saucers. But Hunrath's connection to the name went deeper. The year before the disappearance, he claimed a tall man in a dark suit entered his bedroom in Wisconsin, paralyzed him, and injected him with a strange chemical. The being introduced himself as Bosco, an emissary, quote, from the Brotherhood of Galaxies. His message was simple. The world was heading toward atomic annihilation in a war with the Soviets, and Hunrath had been chosen to help stop it. When Bosco vanished through the window, Hunrath said he could still see the light from his departure. After that night, Hunrath was changed. He quit his job and began designing weapons. Blueprints, he said, downloaded telepathically from aliens. Wilkinson followed him like a disciple, uprooting his family and moving 2,000 miles west to Los Angeles, where they embedded themselves in the fringe UFO scene. They met George Adamski, the infamous contactee who claimed to have spoken with angelic beings from Venus, and George Hunt Williamson, who once tried to reach aliens via Ouija board. Even the FBI took notice of the group. By autumn, Hunrath was convinced the Misserians had chosen him for a mission. He began calling friends, telling them that people were already being taken off-planet. He said he might be next. If he disappeared, he warned, quote, "Don't be surprised." The next morning, he and Wilkinson rented a Cessna 140 from Gardena Valley Airport around 12:30 p.m. and lifted off toward the high country. Most people presumed that Hunrath, an inexperienced pilot, probably crashed somewhere in the mountainous terrain east of Los Angeles. Search planes from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Aero Squadron and the Civil Air Patrol spent a week combing the mountains, but no wreckage was ever found. In the vacuum, theories multiplied. A mountain downdraft crash that eluded searchers. A futile dash toward Mexico on too little fuel. A staged disappearance. But for believers, it was an off-planet pickup. Hunrath's prophecy came true, and they were lifted from the sky by the very beings they sought. The Los Angeles Mirror-News helped amplify that narrative 9 days later in a story linking the case to UFO abductions. To this day, no trace of the aircraft or the men has ever been found. The plane simply vanished. Either way, somewhere between Los Angeles and the void, 2 men went searching for the stars and never came back. The Silver Elves. On a gray Arkansas morning, duck hunters stumbled upon a maroon SUV parked at the edge of a flooded bayou. The keys were still in the ignition. The driver's clothes, pants wet to the knees, shirt still warm, wallet untouched, lay stacked in a neat pile 100 yards away. But what chilled investigators most wasn't what they found in the woods. It was what they found in his journal. A passage about the Silver Elves, a secretive group that spoke of walking into water, of rebirth, of immortality. The missing man was 23-year-old Matthew Pendergrast, a Rhodes College student who believed in kindness, service, and perhaps something otherworldly. Pendergrast wasn't some wayward driver. He was the son of an Atlanta surgeon, a cross-country runner, a drummer, a volunteer for orphans in the Dominican Republic. His senior thesis was nearly done, and he was only 2 weeks away from graduation. He'd been upbeat the night before. A voicemail he left that morning was mundane, quote, "Everything's all right, no problem." Except, of course, everything was not all right. In the days that followed, police dogs traced Matthew's scent from the pile of clothes to the water's edge. But they found nothing else. No trail, no struggle, no body. Then investigators opened his journal and made the discovery. A single mysterious phrase: Silver Elves. To most, it meant nothing. To detectives, it suggested something darker. The group was founded in the 1970s by occultists Michael and Martha Love, known as Zardoa Silver Star and Silver Flame. They believed some humans are elves in spirit, born into the wrong world, destined to awaken and return to fairy through acts of magic, ritual, and transformation. Members claimed an elven, transcendent identity, seeking immortality through symbolic rebirth in water. In his journal, Matthew described lying down in freezing mud, imagining his blood crystallizing into ice. Investigators wondered if this was fantasy or a blueprint, a psychic hired by the police, claimed she saw Matthew entering the water of the bayou, surrendering himself to a transformative ritual to be reborn as a silver elf. But Matthew's mother, Mary Ellen, never bought it. Quote, "He never folded his clothes in his life," she said. Investigators agreed. The scene felt staged, like someone wanted them to think he'd vanished into myth. There were darker theories. Drugs, a carjacking, even a corpse hidden in a Cadillac trunk. But none of it stuck. The one thing everyone agrees on: Matthew was not the type to disappear. Not without a goodbye. Not without a reason. To this day, an electric candle still burns in the Pendergrass dining room window. A light for a young man who believed in magic, who sought wonder in words and water, and who may have found something or someone waiting in the trees. UFO. They found his car first, a dusty Volkswagen Beetle, his guitar resting in the back seat like a body. A box of unsold vinyl records sat on the passenger side, several stamped with 3 letters: UFO. Play that record front to back, and it traces a route. Desert heat, roadside warnings, long empty highways, and a narrator who keeps staring skyward, wondering about visitors arriving in UFOs. The man who made them, Jim Sullivan, checked into a motel in Santa Rosa, New Mexico, drove 26 miles into nowhere, and vanished. And the strange thing is, he seemed to know it was coming. Jim Sullivan was not the kind of man who should have disappeared. A tall, magnetic figure from a blue-collar family in San Diego, he drifted to Los Angeles in the 1960s, chasing a dream as a musician. His wife, Barbara, worked at Capitol Records. Jim played Malibu bars by night, where the surf crowd mixed with Hollywood strays. He hung out with Dennis Hopper, who cast him in the film Easy Rider. The Wrecking Crew, the same studio band that played for the Beach Boys, backed him on his debut album, titled UFO, in 1969. It was a strange, haunting mix of folk and cosmic Americana that no one quite knew what to do with. The lyrics read today like messages from another dimension. He wrote about long highways and strange lights, about asking whether a visitor might come by UFO, about a restlessness he couldn't name, the road pulling one way, the sky pulling the other. The album wasn't a gimmick. Friend said Sullivan was deeply fascinated by the idea of extraterrestrial life. Yet success always hovered just out of reach. By 1975, his marriage was unraveling, his career stalled. He believed a fresh start in Nashville would save him. Instead, it became the last waypoint on a road to nowhere. On March 4th, Jim left Los Angeles with $120 and a head full of songs. Somewhere along the way, he was pulled over by police near Santa Rosa, New Mexico. He passed a sobriety test, checked into the La Mesa Motel, and bought a bottle of vodka. The next morning, he drove 26 miles into the desert and vanished. When his car was found days later, everything he owned was still inside. Money, clothes, records, and that guitar. To anyone who knew him, that detail was chilling. Jim would never have gone anywhere without his guitar. The official theories were predictable: murder, foul play, or simply wandering into the desert to die. But none of them fit. There was no body, no struggle, no real sign of distress. What lingered instead was the unsettling coincidence between the man's music and his fate. Decades later, a small label reissued UFO and reignited the mystery. Listeners today call it one of the eeriest lost albums of the 20th century. Jim's voice sounds weathered and prophetic, as if broadcasting from somewhere just out of reach. Maybe he is still out there, somewhere beyond the headlights, singing into the static of the desert night. A voice on the radio that was never meant to come home. Which of these disappearances gives you chills? Let me know in the comments. As always, thank you for watching Dark 5. Like and subscribe to continue exploring the greatest mysteries of this world and beyond.